Welcome. I wanted to make a video about leadership. Now, I have to say that one of the reasons leadership is important to me is because I had three actually really wonderful mentors. Actually, now that I think about it, four mentors over the course of my life that did a very important job of talking with me just about what good leadership looks like. I've been around communities and faith places and obviously in families too. There's always this principle that a good system, whether it's a family, a workplace, or just a larger community, needs to have some sense of leadership, but there also needs to be some sense of health. And I've seen it, what happens when those places hit a tipping point and they shift from being healthy into unhealthy. And so I thought it'd be interesting to try to glean together some of the insights that I've received from those three or four mentors, but then also from Edwin Friedman and his book called The Failure of Nerve. So I'm going to use my iPad right now and try to draw out the way that I think about some of these things, because honestly, I think just more people need to know about it. Okay, so let's do this. So this is immediately applicable for families, for workplaces, and for communities. Now, communities could be a sports team, could be a club, could be your neighborhood, could be a faith community, as I've already said. There's a lot of different ways communities can happen. But when you have enough, when you have enough people to comprise a community, it's a wonderful thing. You have all these people that are gathered around a shared interest or hobby or set of values, and frankly, it's wonderful, right? So this circle is going to symbolize the fringes or the edges, the boundary of who's inside the community and who's outside of it, who's in the family, out of it, workplaces, And although it's a defined line here, we all know that these families, workplaces, communities are rather porous. People can come in and out of them all the time. But let's do M for members. When you start to have enough people together to create a community, you start to have this. Enough members are coming together around a particular hobby, value system, team, objective, you can say. But as more people start to aggregate, there almost naturally comes to be this sense of who's the leadership. And the leadership is important because the leadership actually is not really there in order to tell people where we're going or where the family, workplace, or community is going. In some sense, the group already knows what their values are, but they may not be living up to it. And so actually, healthy leadership is not about telling people what to do in that capacity. If anything, it's more like they are antibodies. Just like how you and I in our bodies, we have these cells that exist. And they go around, they help the whole system to stay healthy. They can maybe move around, but at least here in our picture, they are at the center of the whole organization, the family, the workplace, the community. Now, here's where things get interesting. What happens when you have a community that has members and you've got some sufficient leadership that exists as antibodies, and along comes a virus? This could be someone that does not actually share the same values and has started to become disruptive in a destructive way. Because you can be disruptive in a healthy way, in a way that actually invites more order and more health. But for here, a virus. And let's say the virus talks to another member and another, and they start to gather as a group. When you start to have that, you then have some competing interests. You actually have something of a power play happening between the leadership that are supposed to be antibodies and the viruses, these people that perhaps are unhealthy, the people that are using gossip. They could be doing manipulative things. They could be triangulating, silencing, siloing. Perhaps they are just in there, but they're not necessarily doing it on purpose, although maybe they are. When this happens, there's a dynamic shift that can happen because all of a sudden the leadership are now with a particular task of going to the viruses, the ones that are doing the manipulation, the triangulating, the silencing, the siloing, the ones that are doing the gossip, the ones that are disrupting the value system of the overall. The job then of the antibodies is to go to them and say, mature up or leave. Meaning, mature up and become a contributing member of this community in a healthy way rather than a destructive one in an unhealthy way. And of course, within a family, within a workplace, within a community, that can be incredibly difficult. Incredibly difficult when all of a sudden you have to tell someone you're not welcome here because you are unhealthy and you're actually negatively impacting the community here. Now, this all takes on another angle when there's a virus in the leadership team. And there could be the possibility that the antibodies are weak. The leadership are weak. Or they're impotent. They don't really have the power to affect any real meaningful change. And as a result, the antibodies there are really no match for the viruses around them. Okay. Now, here's what's so fascinating is that if you have a leadership team that has no real authority, no ability, they're impotent, they're weak in this sense, they can't go to the viruses and tell them to shape up or leave, you're in a dangerous spot. Because unhealthy systems will always cater to the least mature among them. Let me say it again. Unhealthy systems, whether it's a family, workplace, or community, will always cater, bend over, backwards. They will adapt to the least mature in the group rather than tell the least mature they have to get along with the group. Does that make sense? So, for instance, let's say you've got a very strong antibody virus on this side. What can start to happen is the whole system then starts to shift its attention towards that virus rather than paying attention to the antibodies and the leadership that could be right there. And so often what will happen is then you have the multiplication of further viruses. The longer you go without confronting a virus for not having the value system, for not being a healthy contributing member, the longer you do that, the more the system, the family, workplace, or community, is prone to having more viruses start to populate and enter into the system until all of a sudden it's too much for the leadership to handle, and then the leadership quit, burn out, they leave, they become despondent, they have a breakdown of themselves, and essentially you have the community effectively being destroyed and it's no longer what it once was. So at this point, it's going to be vitally important for there to be one-to-one interactions and for every one of these viruses to have an antibody go to them until you have the tipping point where all of a sudden now things are back into a potential even scoring. Mm-mm-mm. Ah, isn't that nice? And so that means the leadership, the antibodies, it is on some level their ethical responsibility to not be weak, but instead to be strong in this, that they go around and they tell people to be mature. And as I said before, if the immaturity is in the leadership team, so for instance, let's do this. Boom. Let's say you have some viruses at the center of the whole thing, but the membership, they don't know about it. But there might be a few people that might choose to start to work together to get to the center of the real issue and surround it with health and accountability and transparency and maturity. Those are the things that can save, that can redeem, that can bring back a community from the brink of utter destruction. And so, the hope is that healthy communities, they don't always need to raise up people to be leaders everywhere. But what they do need to do is to be a leadership that goes around and elevates every single member to have the responsibility, the ethical responsibility to the whole community to multiply and to be further antibodies of health that go around and tell people, that encourage people, that lift up people, and to help them to mature up all the time. And so let's just recap a few thoughts. Okay. Edwin Friedman, in his book, he talks about how unhealthy systems will cater to the least mature among them. And that can be someone that's just an average member. It can be the boss. It can be the patriarch. It can be the matriarch as well, especially if you've ever seen the movie Encanto by Disney and Pixar. That's a beautiful example of a matriarch having some virus tendencies that are affecting the whole of the community, of the family, you know? So be mindful when you're a part of a community, a family, a workplace, or something else that doesn't have strong antibodies. Now, to be an antibody and to be a leader does not necessarily mean that you have titles. It may mean that people simply look to you as if you're an unofficial elder. People look to you as an example of what a model member is supposed to be and what it's supposed to look like. So keep all these things in mind, because I really think that as I personally started to integrate some of these insights about what it means to be in a healthy community, what does healthy leadership look like? What does it mean to have a community that's at the tipping point of having too many viruses compared to antibodies? You start to see it everywhere. This can easily be in a classroom. This can easily be in, I guess, a school system among the teachers. It can be in a Fortune 500 business. This could be happening at Google, could be happening at Facebook, could be happening in a lot of these larger institutions, but it can even happen within a family. And so the same principles actually apply, whether it's on the micro or the macro, it doesn't matter. Our communities are in many ways biological organisms with little components working together. And it's fascinating when you can depersonalize the things that are happening within the family, workplace, and community and start to see what's happening. Oh, that's a virus. This is an antibody. And by the way, sometimes if a community has too much unhealth, whether it's a family, workplace, or something else, if the unhealth has become the norm for so long, if there's one antibody The whole system might look at the antibody and say, you're the virus. But be mindful, because viruses will never tell people that they need to be held accountable. But antibodies will always be in favor of increased accountability, not only to one another, but also to the family, workplace, and community. So I hope this was helpful. I hope it started to scratch an itch. And I hope that this was at least fascinating for you to listen to. Because for me, it utterly changed the way I personally saw families, workplaces, and communities. Okay? So that's all for now. I hope you enjoyed it again. So grace and peace. Cheers.